What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to be discussing the potential greatness of the Green Bay Packers defense, words that have not been uttered, and I don't even know how long, but we're going to go into that in just a moment. But before we get there, we had a couple news and notes from Wednesday that I want to discuss first. First of all, Christian Watson was officially signed to his rookie deal, so I know there was some angst and concern over whether or not he would sign in time for training camp and be ready to go, but he is officially signed, sealed, and delivered and will be ready to go for the start of training camp. Never really had any major concerns there. Always expected that to get done before rookies were set to report. It got done, so we can move on from that, and Christian Watson can be ready to go and hopefully ready to tear up the NFL. In addition, Green Bay had a few players in for tryouts. Brian Gutekunst clearly listened to me saying that Green Bay was not going to sign a high-end veteran wide receiver prior to the start of training camp and says, watch me, I will try out John Brown. Clearly, John Brown is not a high-end free agent wide receiver, but he is a veteran wide receiver. Not necessarily something that I would have expected. To be clear, they have not signed him, at least as of recording this, but an interesting trial player nonetheless. He has been a journeyman who has not found a home over the last couple seasons. This is, in my opinion, more of a, break glass in case of emergency sort of, look-see, if you will. Just kind of seeing what he has left. If all of a sudden he tried out and he looked amazing, then maybe you bring him in and just say, hey, if we have injuries or for some reason, if he beats out Sammy Watkins and just, looks better, we'll make that decision when the time comes. But he has not been signed as of yet. I think this is more of just if I'm sure you know this, but Green Bay and every other team will put together their list of potential in-season acquisitions of if you end up with injuries, who's on that free agent list. And last year, that list consisted of one Rasul Douglas. So it's very important to try these players out and know who's available and who could potentially sign when those things go down. So that would be more my guess, is that John Brown is a, potential list addition, if you will, not a pre-training camp acquisition, but we will see, and maybe he gets signed or maybe he's already signed after I've recorded this. We'll see. But he tried out. Sal Cannella, a tight end, tried out, as did Aaron Service, a offensive tackle who's actually from Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin, and then Bryce Watts, a corner, all tried out with the Packers on Wednesday. So we'll see if they make any corresponding moves after trying those four players out. All right, that brings us to our main discussion for today, and that's why I believe the defense can be great in 2022. And this is something that, again, hasn't been discussed in a long period of time with the Packers defense. I know we had the Aaron Rodgers, we have a defense moment. Spoiler alert, they didn't have a defense. They just played Mitch Trubisky and the Bears in that game. But I do believe wholeheartedly, I don't think this is just rose-tinted glasses. I don't think this is just, optimistic, hope springs eternal season. I do legitimately believe that the Packers defense can be great in 2022. Now, what level they reach and what level of potential greatness they reach is still remain to be seen. My expectation is a top 10 defense. They, to me, have the talent, the ability, the wherewithal, the scheme, all of it, the athletic ability to be a top 10 defense in 2022. If they do not finish in the top 10, to me, that would be a disappointment. Now, if they're 11th or 12th, maybe, and they, have a bunch of turnovers, you could still, maybe get by there. But to me, this is a top 10 defense and should perform as such. And I want to see Joe Barry get a top 10 defense out of this unit that consists of a ton of free agent or high-end free agents and first-round picks. You go across the board with their 11 starters, and everyone is literally, I think, like a first-round pick or a top-tier free agent. Let's just go through it quick, right? So you've got Kenny Clark, first-round pick. Devontae Wyatt, first-round pick. Dean Lowry, who is like, a free agent re-signing, if you will, who's not on a cheap deal in any way, shape, or form. Devondre Campbell, big free agent signing. Quay Walker, first-round pick. Jair Alexander, first-round pick. Eric Stokes, first-round pick. Rasul Douglas, free agent signing or re-signing. Darnell Savage, first-round pick. Adrian Amos, big first-round signing. So, basically Rashan Gary, first-round pick, and then Preston Smith, big free agent signing. I knew it was forgetting a couple there, but everywhere you look, it is filled with first-round picks or players they are paying significant money to. There is no reason for this not to be a top-performing defense. But in order to understand if they can be great this season, we really need to take a look back and see what happened in 2021. Because I think a lot of people, even really myself included, the most recent memory is what we sort of have in our minds as we go into the off season, right? And our most recent memory was that 49ers game. And to be fair, that 49ers game was freaking awesome from a defensive standpoint. But on the flip side, extremely poor conditions. Both offenses really struggled to do anything in that game. Beyond that, it was Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, a player that the 49ers literally just put on the trade block yesterday. And I don't think that that was a quote unquote top performing offense. They have some good players, no question about it. Trent Williams, best offensive lineman in football. George Kittle, one of the best, if not the best tight ends in football. You've got Deebo Samuel. So it's not like they're devoid of weapons. Kyle Juszczyk, best fullback in football. So they definitely have some pieces there, right? But like with Jimmy G at quarterback, this is an average offense in poor conditions. And Green Bay, to their defense, was able to, basically completely shut that 49ers offense down. So that's what we have fresh in our memory. But what did the stats say throughout the course of the season? They were 14th in points against, which is not bad, especially with all the injuries they had. Za'Darius being hurt all year, Jair being hurt all year, etc. 14th in points against, 9th in yards against, so that's not bad. 18th in yards per play, okay, mediocre at best. 9th in turnovers forced, which is good. 5th in net yards per pass attempt, which is really freaking good. 30th in rushing yards per attempt, which is really freaking bad. 4th in penalty yardage, really good. 15th overall in scoring percentage. 8th in turnover percentage. Both of those are good. But 22nd in DVOA. If you're not familiar with DVOA, Google it. We're not going to spend all of our time here today. But it is one of, if not the best indicators of how your defense actually performed over the course of a season. And they were 22nd. And for comparison's sake, that was worse than in 2021 when Mike Pettin got fired for that defensive performance that season. So while we have this idea that Green Bay's defense took major steps a season ago and showed real legitimate improvement, and some of those statistics definitely show that, the best statistic, the best analytic that would actually tell you the story is saying, not so fast. They were actually 22nd and a pretty mediocre to slightly below average defense, if not below average defense this past season. So why do we think then that maybe this could be the year? Why would there be maybe a difference in 2022 over 2021? A lot of it is player focused, which we're going to get to in a second. But before we even get to the defensive side of the ball, I do think there are some things that surround this team that are going to potentially make this a better defensive season for Green Bay. First of all is the offensive strategy. And this, I think, is going to be very similar to a season ago, but I expect this to be a very ball control offense. Now, I am not saying that I think this is going to be an extreme run heavy offense. And I think when we think of ball control, we think of just, all right, ground and pound, handing the ball off a ton, grinding clock, etc. I don't think it's going to be that. This is Aaron Rodgers' team. He's going to throw the ball a ton. I don't care if, you have the 5 worst receivers in football on your roster. If you've got Aaron Rodgers, you're still going to throw the ball a ton. All right. So that is, to me, what is going to happen is they're going to still have a ball control offense, but they're still going to pass, but it's going to be efficient passing. Still going to be plays that eat clock. I don't think there's going to be a ton of explosive plays. I hope I'm wrong on that. I hope Green Bay is able to generate a ton of explosive plays, but I think this is going to be another grinded out sort of season for the Packers offense, losing MVS, losing Devontae Adams. We'll see what Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, etc. can provide, Sammy Watkins, but I do think there's going to probably be some struggles creating some of those explosive plays again, which leads me to believe that this will be more of a ball control offense. And if that's the case, that will chew more clock, that will make it so that the offense is on the field more, and that just creates less heavy lifting for the defensive side of the ball. I also expect Green Bay to be once again one of the league leaders, if not the league leader, in turning over the football, or not turning over the football, I guess I should say. So when you have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, you're just going to have an offense that's basically devoid of turnovers because he doesn't throw interceptions. And this is an offense that generally, knock on wood or whatever other object that is lucky for you, I don't think they're going to have a ton of playmakers who have a ton of issues with fumbles and things like that. I expect this to be an offense that doesn't turn the ball over a ton. And if that's the case, that sets the defense up for success as well. And I do think the offensive line is going to be better. You might think, like, Andy, what does David Bakhtiari and eventually Elton Jenkins and a better offensive line have to do with the defense being better? Well, frankly, I think A, it can make the run game better, which chews more clock. But B, more importantly, I think this is a head coach and a play caller in Matt LaFleur that loves to go for it a ton on fourth downs. And I think a better offensive line, some of those 4th and shorts, 4th and 1s, maybe even 4th and 2s, just gives you a better opportunity to convert those. And instead of your defense having to go on the field after a failed 4th down and have the ball maybe in plus territory, Now all of a sudden the offense keeps the ball, runs more clock, and gets in their opponent's territory, or at least deeper in their opponent's territory. That just gives you a better opportunity as well. So I think overall, the state of the offense could make things easier on the defense in 2022. The other is, of course, special teams. Now, I am not putting my eggs in the special teams basket until we see proof in the pudding, right? This is a lot of weird cliches in one sentence, but I do wholeheartedly believe that the special teams will be improved in some capacity. Now, as I mentioned this week on multiple occasions, I think that's probably going from the worst special teams of all time to like the 28th, 27th, 26th ranked special teams. But even if that's it, even if it's still the 26th worst special teams, that is a pretty big improvement from the worst special teams of all time, in my opinion, to 26th. If just your net punting average is a little bit better, your punt coverage is a little bit better, your kick coverage is a little bit better, you're not allowing blocked punts or blocked field goals, blocked kicks, if that stuff just gets cleaned up a little bit, in that scenario, you're inherently going to set your defense up for better success and not put them in horrible positions, right? So I think the special teams just being even marginally better than they were a season ago can actually help this defense out as well. So now let's actually jump to the defensive side of the ball and go over why I think the defense can be great in 2022. The first is I do believe in this defensive strategy, and I know it can be frustrating at times, and it's not a ton different than what Mike Pettine was doing before he got fired. Every team in the league is going to a more bend but don't break defense, and the idea behind it is you're going to have to go, you're going to have to go 15 plays, 75 yards if you want to score a touchdown. You can dink and dunk, but we don't think you can get there in 15 plays, 75 yards without committing a turnover, without committing a penalty, without having to punt or kick the ball. Like at some point, something's going to go wrong. Your offense is going to malfunction, and we're going to make you do that. And if you do it once or twice, okay, we're willing to give you 2 touchdowns in the game, but we certainly don't think you can do it 3 or 4 times. And if you can hold the opposing team to 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals, you're giving yourself a really good chance to win football games, and you're going to probably be a plus defense at allowing 20 points per game. That would be fantastic, right? So that is more the defensive philosophy, but specifically in how Joe Barry got there, I think was better than how Mike Pettine got there. Mike Pettine was doing a bunch of different things, but it didn't amount to much success, if we're being honest. Joe Barry at least had a philosophy that he was going to keep his 2 safeties deep more often than not. He was really going to make it so that you weren't going to get those explosive plays, but he had ways within that to stop the run better. I know it didn't show on a yards per attempt, but overall in run yardage and sort of like how they dared teams to beat them. And I thought overall that his philosophy was working, even if it wasn't picture perfect at times due to some of the players and the talent level on the field. I liked how he called games. More importantly, for the first time in a long time, I could see a cohesive unit that was moving as 11 players, moving as a team rather than 11 individual players. I could see players rallying to the football. I saw better tackling. I saw better emphasis on gap integrity and making sure that you're not abandoning your spot. I just saw better team defense, and I think that's going to continue over. And I think in year 2 of Joe Barry's defense, this defense has the ability to take off and play even better than they did in his first season. So strategy scheme, in my opinion, works, and I think we're going to see it take a step, if not a leap, in 2022. Now let's go sort of position by position. The first one, and as I've mentioned in the past, one of my favorite things that Brian Gutekunst and company did this offseason was sort of rebuild and reinvigorate this defensive line. It may not seem major, right? They basically added 3 players, and one of them's a 7th round pick. But by adding a rotational defensive lineman in Jerron Reed, a 7th round pick in Jonathan Ford, and a 1st round pick in Devontae Wyatt, with clearly Wyatt being the major addition here, it just feels to me that there is a renewed, emphasis on the defensive line. And in my opinion, they have a rotation that can be used in a variety of different ways. They have different players with different skill sets, and I am really excited to see what this defensive line can do. We know what Kenny Clark can do. Now he has help. Hopefully doesn't have to play 60 plus snaps per game and can actually get some rest and be saved for later in the game, big moments, or more importantly, later in the season when they need him to be in peak performance and at peak levels. Dean Lowry, a season ago, as mentioned, after the first 4 weeks, played some of the best football of his career. If he can continue that and carry that over, that would be a huge win for the Packers defense. TJ Slayton seems more than ready to take a step, even if it's as a situational nose tackle, run defender with a little bit of juice as a pass rusher. I still think he's going to take a major step from where he was a season ago, and I think he's going to be a legit rotational player on this defense. I think Jarran Reed's going to be a rotational player. I don't think he's more than like a replacement level rotational defender, but you need those. You need guys that can just eat 20 snaps, not be bad, probably not be good, but nondescript, right? If your fifth defensive lineman as a rotational guy is a nondescript player who you're not yelling at because he's out of his gap or getting pushed 5 yards down the field, that has a lot of value. And I think Jarran Reed can at minimum be that. And then again, Devontae Wyatt, Jonathan Ford, I think he can be a better version of what Tyler Lancaster was, a big mammoth run stuffing player that's hard to move. Jonathan Ford doesn't need to do anything more than that. If he can provide 8 to 10 snaps as a run defender, that has value. And I think he can do that. This potential six-person defensive line rotation is the best that Green Bay's had in a very long time, and I think that has the ability to set Green Bay up for success overall. I think that's going to make it easier on the edge rushers. I think it's going to make it easier on the inside linebackers, Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker, etc. And I also believe that it's going to make them better in that the category that they were worst in a season ago in the rushing yards per attempt. They were 30th, I think, with a reinvigorated Kenny Clark who doesn't have to play as many snaps, a run stuffer in Jonathan Ford, a rotational player in Jarran Reed, a first-round pick in Devontae Wyatt, Dean Lowry playing better. I think you add all of these things up, TJ Slayton taking a step. I think you have the means to really be a solid run-stuffing unit. And once again, I'm not saying they need to be a top 5 run defense, right? But if you go from like 30th to 15th, 16th, 17th in rushing yards per attempt, that's a major improvement. And more importantly, what that does is that makes it so that it's not 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 2. Now all of a sudden, because you're stopping the run on early downs, it's 3rd and 8, it's 3rd and 9. And that makes things so much easier on Preston Smith, Rashan Gary, your corners, like everyone, because you know they're passing the football at least like 98% of the time, right? So you can hedge your bets, you can play pass, you can get after the quarterback, and everyone else's job is so much easier. That's my biggest complaint with the Mike Pettin defense of so many years is they didn't eat their vegetables on early down. He wanted to play all of these undersized defenses and make sure that teams weren't completing passes against them. That all sounds fine until it's 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 over and over and over and over and over and over again because you can't stop the run on 1st and 2nd down. And now everyone's in consistently good positions on 3rd down, and you can't use these lighter fronts. You can't use all of your crazy blitz packages because you can't get teams in 3rd and long. Green Bay did a better job of it last season. I think they're even going to be better this season, and I think that's the biggest reason why I really expect this defense to take a step this upcoming season. Edge rushers probably the same, right? You've got Preston Smith, Rashan Gary, and then a bunch of question marks. However, if there's any player on this team that's ready to go from really good to great to potential star or maybe even superstar, it's Rashan Gary. I'm not saying he's going to get there. I'm not saying all of a sudden he becomes, one of the top 3 or 4 edge rushers in all of football. But he could. It's within the realm of possibility. And if all of a sudden Rashan Gary becomes just a constant nuisance, a player that needs to be double teamed more often than not, a player that is constantly keeping opposing offensive coordinators up at night, then look the heck out, because that is a player that can completely unlock this defense and make things so much easier. If he's getting pressure, those corners that you have, we're going to discuss in a second, who have the ability to be really, really, really good corners, if all of a sudden Rashan Gary is just a wrecking ball and the quarterback is starting to feel like, I got to get the ball out of my hands, man, it just sets your entire pass defense up for success. If Rashan Gary is special, this defense can be special. He has the ability to be that. How far he gets will tell a long story of like, is this a top 12 defense or is this a top 3 defense? Rashan Gary can unlock that. I think he can. Whether or not he will remain to be seen. But that's another reason why I think this defense could take a step is because of the emergence of Rashan Gary into a potential star player this upcoming season. Inside linebacker, listen, I love Chris Barnes. Really, really like Chris Barnes. I think he's done just a really fantastic job of going from undrafted free agent to really like maybe reliable players, like the wrong word, but like he's such a consistent player, and he's never going to be like a top 20 inside linebacker, right? But like there's a huge difference between like a Chris Barnes and a Ty Summers or an Isaiah McDuffie or like those type of players. Like you can rely upon Chris Barnes to be who he is and not completely tank your defense. And I love what he brought to the team. He called plays at times. He had consistent effort and intensity, and he made some big plays at times too. But there was a limit to his ceiling, right? welcome in Quay Walker, because Quay Walker and his ceiling and what he can bring to the table is totally different. And if we should note here that the recent inside linebackers that have been selected outside of Micah Parsons, who's just a freak, have had a learning curve. And it takes some time for these inside linebackers to really get their feet under them more often than not. But I do believe they're going to have a specific role and a way to make Quay Walker successful in his rookie season and be able to add value to this team. Will there be some mistakes? Will there be some bumps in the road? I have no question about that. There are going to be some times you're like, that's rookie stuff. But I also think he's going to bring a lot of athleticism to the table. And I wholeheartedly believe that Joe Barry wanted to run a lot more nickel this past season and just really couldn't do that because of not having the second linebacker that he wanted to, especially in passing situations. Going from Chris Barnes, who struggled in coverage at times, to a Quay Walker who should be able to hold up much better is a game changer and just another reason why I think this defense is really going to improve this upcoming season. And then, of course, corner. You're getting back arguably the best cover corner in all of football in Jair Alexander full-time. Like, one of the biggest additions to any team this season will be the return of Jair Alexander. That's how good he is. There's a reason he's the top paid corner in football, and bringing him back. And listen, Stokes and Douglas performed really, really well. But to go from basically Chandon Sullivan to Jair Alexander is just such an insane leap. And I can't even begin to tell you like how much of a shutdown player he can be. We've seen him match up against some of the top wide receivers in football in the past and have great success against them. Now, all of a sudden, adding that back in the fold and then making the heavy lifting on Douglas and Stokes less, right? Because Douglas and Stokes now don't have to worry about the Justin Jeffersons of the world. They're now worried about the number 2, number 3 wide receivers. And that makes things a ton easier. Eric Stokes was guarding Jamar Chase and at times did a really good job at that phenomenal play where he batted away that deep ball, right? Now instead of Stokes, that's going to be Jair Alexander. And again, now you can have Stokes and Douglas take the number 2 and 3 receivers, and that's going to be a lot easier for those guys, and they should even have more success. And you just add in a good defensive front with good pass rush up front from Rashan Gary, good inside linebackers that are sound tacklers, and now really good cover guys that you can play man or zone with. And it just sets Joe Barry up for so much success. And then last but not least is safety, where to me, Darnell Savage is the big X factor on this defense, because in 2020, Darnell Savage was one of my top 5 graded players on defense. In 2021, he was one of my 3 lowest graded players on defense, a massive swing. And that could be that he just didn't fit well within this Joe Barry system. This will be his opportunity to prove that that's not the case. But he is I was going to get to this later, but I'll just say it now. He's the only defender that graded in the negative last season for me that has any sort of role on this defense. And if you turn that negative into a positive, look out, because you do not have any weakness on this starting defense. And even the rotational players up front that are coming in along the defensive line, you have the guys that you need to succeed with very few weak spots. And that is ultimately why I really believe that Green Bay can be a top 10, top 5 defense, is because the lack of weaknesses. And we've talked now about the guys that came in, right? The Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, your Jerron Reeds, etc., Jair Alexander coming back. But to me, it's almost more about the players that are gone. Henry Black, Kingsley Keke, Chandon Sullivan, Kevin King, Tyler Lancaster, Isaac Yiadom, Chauncey Rivers, all graded in the negative. And one other one, my lowest graded player last season on offense or defense, was Jonathan Garvin with a negative 6.15. Extremely unlikely that he plays. First of all, I don't think he's going to make the team. Second, even if he does, extremely unlikely that he plays the snaps that he did last year. And the only reason that he would play the snaps that he did last year is if he showed massive improvement, in my opinion. He's going to have to show massive improvement even to make the team. So hopefully, even if he does play those snaps, maybe it's a -2 or a -1 rather than a -6.5, which would be a very big improvement and a bigger help to this defense. But the only player that is back playing any significant role, as just mentioned, that was in the negative a season ago was Darnell Savage. And if he gets back to that 2020 level, it just has so much potential to be a flying around defense with no weaknesses, where if I'm an offensive coordinator, I'm going to have to work really, really hard to figure out what mismatch I want to pick on, because I may not have one inherently with what Green Bay's defense is putting on the field. One last thing I'll say here is I think, Green Bay has the ability to play a lot of the same players. And Ben Fennell and I talked about this a lot in the past when I've had him on, but so many times, if you've got to sub a bunch of players in, it's a lot of times because you don't have a player that can do everything really well. Like you're platooning players, right? Like you're bringing in Chris Barnes on early downs, and then on later downs, you're trying to bring a safety down in the box that could maybe cover better. But it's because you don't have the guy that can do everything, right? I think they have the 2 edge rushers, the main defensive linemen, the 2 linebackers, the 3 corners, and the 2 safeties that can do everything, that you don't have to take them off the field. Clearly, your edge rushers and your defensive linemen are going to rotate at times. You're not going to play those guys every snap in the game, but you're only taking guys out because they need rest. You're not taking anyone out of that starting 11 because they need a platoon. They're all good enough to be 70 down or 70 snap players in any given game, outside of, again, your defensive linemen and edge rushers needing rest at times. So the fact that you can keep the same guys on the field is just another reason I think this defense can be really, really good, and they can match up with almost any offense that's out there. The fact that they have all of these potential answers to all of the offensive questions. I love the scheme. I think the players and the talents are better. I think they're going to be better against the run. I think they're going to be able to continue to pressure the quarterback, continue to get turnovers. Those are all the reasons I really think Green Bay can be a successful defense. And maybe the bigger thing is I just think they have a lack of weaknesses, which is the biggest thing opposing teams can go out and attack. You have a Kevin King and a Chandon Sullivan out there with, a lot, and that's going to get targeted, and you're going to get beat more often than you want. So I think the fact that they have all 11 players out there from a starting unit, especially on third downs when you need it most, fourth downs, big plays, I think they're going to be much more stingy, and I can't wait to watch this defense play in 2022. I have concerns still. I think depth is a concern. I think pressure could potentially get stagnant at times, especially if teams take Rashan Gary out of the game. That's going to, if Rashan can't get there, if he gets injured for some reason, that puts a lot of pressure on Preston and Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, Dean Lowry, and I think your pressure could really suffer. But man, Rashan Gary could be a one-man wrecking crew too, and that could be a total non-starter and might not be any sort of issue. So love the defense, love where we're headed. Can't wait to watch this defense this season. I'm just praying and hoping and finger crossing that this defense can stay healthy and stick together, because they have the ability to be a very special unit. That does it for me today. Thank you for joining me. Always appreciate it. Be right back here tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go, and shout out and happy birthday to my friend Kat.